but Elohim knows. Notice that it doesn't say Yahweh, it says Elohim, because here it was Sabaoth with his angels fighting or struggling against Elohim and his angels, and Yahweh above all of them. But Elohim knows that the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. Here we know that he isn't lying. And I say this, right? Carefully, and I'm going to explain it, because in Christianity for years I saw the misinterpretation of these verses, as if everything the serpent said was a lie. And that's not the case. In fact, the serpent often uses the truth to deceive. Mostly truth with a little bit of a lie is the best way to deceive, because it brings a lot of truth as its foundation. So, it says, but Elohim knows that the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. Then Yahweh Elohim said, now it is Yahweh Elohim, so we can make the distinction for what comes next. Man has become like one of us. In other words, it was true. You will eat and you will be like Elohim, because after Elohim, it says, he has now become like us. It really was true. But it says, he has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. So, to be like Elohim, you needed the knowledge of good and evil, because Elohim is a title that refers to judgment. To be a judge, you need to know good and evil, the law. That's why the Torah is the tree of written knowledge, because it tells us what is right and what is wrong. It's clear. Yes, he became like Elohim, but he did not become like Yahweh. Very different. Why? Because he hadn't eaten from the tree of life to become eternal. So yes, he became like Elohim, but not like Yahweh. Very different. Then it says, but Elohim knows that the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened. Your eyes will be opened. Just like we saw in Revelation 3 with Laodicea, because you were blind and naked. Here they were naked and didn't realize it because they had a spiritual blindness, a blindness of knowledge. Because, I repeat, a blind person can realize they're naked by touch, but here we're talking about a spiritual blindness. So it says, but Elohim knows that the day you eat from it your eyes will be opened, just like in Laodicea. The letter to Laodicea, Yahweh says, I advise you to buy salve so you can see. And it's curious because I already talked about this, right? Well, in the previous chapter, the contrast between Laodicea and what's happening here at the beginning. How Yahweh says, I am at the door and knocking. To Cain it is said, sin is crouching at the door. How they were naked and didn't realize it, they weren't ashamed, while Laodicea doesn't know it's naked and should be ashamed. Here the serpent says, your eyes will be opened. To see, obviously. Yahweh says to Laodicea, you are blind, buy salve so you can see. And that's the seventh congregation, representing the seventh millennium. Just like here the serpent comes after the sixth day, when everything had already been created, to tell Eve, eat and your eyes will be opened. Yahweh tells us through Mashiach, 358, the numerical value of Mashiach. Buy salve so you can see. In other words, so your eyes may be opened. Do you understand what I mean? Just like here, obviously, in the negative sense, the serpent is trying to open Eve's eyes. At the end of the story, Mashiach opens our eyes because we were in error, naked, without knowing it. We didn't have him, and we thought we did. When we were in apostasy, when we were following false doctrines, we thought we were clothed, but we were wrong. We were naked. Do you understand what I mean?